So, I live in Chicago, and the job I was working at the time had me on 12 till 10 shifts. So, 12 in the PM to 10 in the PM, 6 nights a week, and sometimes I wouldn't actually get out of the place till maybe 10:30, so I'd always be driving home late, and I hated it. Right when I was at my lowest, my most hungry, my most tired, Chicago's crazies and outlaws would be hitting the streets to do whatever they do at night. Sometimes I'd bump into one outside the liquor store when I'd stop by to buy smokes. Sometimes I'd make it all the way to the parking lot of my apartment building before someone jumped out of our dumpsters to start trying to rob me. I got used to it after a while. I still hated it, but I was used to my driving home having this crazy edge to it. But then one night, it got way more crazy than usual. So I was driving along one night, and it had been a pretty quiet one so far. I'd done my liquor store run, stopped to buy some groceries from a late-night store, and both stops had been nice and quiet. I figured that I might have gotten lucky on the old crazies front, but once I was back on the road, there was an incident. I think it started when one of the cars ahead of me tried to pass another because there was a loud honk of a horn before someone in one of the cars stuck their arm out of a window to flip the other one off. No such passing took place, so the two cars drove one behind the other until the second set of lights we reached, at which point they managed to draw level with each other. I was right behind them by this point, with one car dead ahead of me and the other just to the right, and they're both right at the head of traffic on the stop line. I remember thinking, if they're going to do anything, it's coming now. And I wasn't wrong, because after that, the passenger in the car on the left flipped the other car off. I thought they might start yelling at each other through open windows before the light turned green, but the driver in front of me opened up his door, climbed out of his driver's seat, and then walked towards the other car before slamming his fist into the passenger window. He started yelling, "Get out and say that to my face, mother effer." But the passenger door didn't open. I thought, uh-oh, these guys don't want the smoke, because they didn't roll down their window or open their doors, and I figured they were just going to zoom off when the lights turned green because they'd messed with the wrong dude. But looking back, I think it was more like the other way around. The man who got out of his car didn't know who he was messing with. The lights turned green, and the cars on either side of us started getting back on the move, but everyone who was stuck behind me in the two cars started honking and yelling for them to make a move. The guy out of his car yelled at everyone to shut up and mind their business, which kind of made me laugh at the same time because we're all literally just trying to get where we're going and this dude's stopping us. But as the guy's yelling at the cars behind, the passenger side window he'd just been punching started to lower, before stopping maybe halfway down. I'm also guessing the guy heard something from inside the car because he turned to look just in time for me to see two flashes and hear two bangs. It was like a real quick pop-pop, and I knew instantly from the sound that it was shots fired before the car that it came from suddenly sped off at what must have been 80 to 90 miles per hour. At first, I thought the shots missed, because the guy that got shot at didn't move or react or anything. He just kind of stood there and watched the car speed off. But then he turned to walk back to his own car, and I realized the shots, or at least one of them, hadn't missed. The guy looked fine, but then, like I said, he turned, and I saw the shots had carved away a huge section of skin and muscle around what I'm guessing was his right eye. He kind of staggered as he walked, with all this blood pouring out of his head, and then I remember how he put a hand up to his head and saw the blood on his hand when he pulled it away. If that was me, I'd have been freaking out, but the guy barely even reacted. He just sort of kept stumbling towards his car for another step or two before his legs seemed to stop working altogether. I saw the moment he realized it too, like he looked down maybe thinking his foot was caught on something, but it wasn't, and I'm guessing one of the bullets scrambled his brain or something because he just sort of lost the ability to walk. Then he fell down, just onto his knees first and then onto his hands too. He reached out for his door like he was trying to grab it for stability. and I could see his fingers gripping and tensing like it was just within reach. Only it wasn't. The car door was at least a foot or two away, but I guess from how messed up his vision was, he couldn't tell, and then he passed out reaching for something he'd never feel. I remember hearing someone behind me honking their horn and yelling out of their window at me to move, but then in the moment after the shots were fired, it was like a starter gun for pure chaos. Cars are zooming left and right, trying to get the hell away because they still don't know where the shots were coming from or if the shooter was still active. For me, shit, all I did was freeze, looking up at that guy's body. You could see bone, like a pinky white underneath the flesh that had been ripped away by either one or both of the bullets, and blood was pouring from what looked like a hole in his skull. It was probably one of the worst things I'd ever seen, but I couldn't look away. And I ended up calling 911 and joined a bunch of people who'd walked out from the sidewalk to see if they could help the guy, but we could all see how bad he was hurt, and I think he was dead by the time the EMTs got him on a stretcher. I told the cops everything I'd seen, but I hadn't managed to get the shooter's license plate either. Or I mean, the car that had the shooter in its passenger seat. After that, I was free to go, but it wasn't over for me, not by a long shot. I had a couple of nightmares where I'd see the guy's face all messed up like it was, and I didn't realize how badly the thing had me messed up until I ended up getting super sick. I wasn't sleeping properly, and I wasn't eating well, and I wasn't getting outside enough. And I guess after a while it all came to a head, and I ended up talking to a girl I knew about it who recommended therapy. And I can't say it worked wonders for me, like it definitely wasn't just a couple of appointments and then I was cured. But it definitely helped me rationalize things, and over time, it helped me get to the stage where I could finally start living normally again. My name's Nick, and I'm from England. Back in the mid-90s, when our son was still only 4, we went on a family holiday to Tuscany in Italy. My wife had found this incredible villa in a holiday brochure, which was up in the hills above a place called Lucalena. It looked like a little slice of paradise, and it was shockingly cheap compared to some of the less rural villas and apartments. So without delay, we booked it for 2 weeks, paid the fees and deposit, then counted the days into our dream holiday. We landed in Pisa in the late afternoon, and while our young son Tom hated the flight, he loved the ice cream that we bought him before the journey out to Lucalena. It was a good 3-hour drive from Pisa, so by the time we were within maybe half an hour of Lucalena in our village, it was completely dark. We were right out in the countryside too, so the stars above us lit up the sky, and little Tom fell asleep after staring out the window at them. My wife was struggling to stay awake by the time we came to a crossroads, and I was pretty exhausted from the day's traveling myself. So rather than make a gut decision on which path to take, I stopped the car, got my map out, and consulted it before making the appropriate turn. I reassured my wife that we were only a few miles away and that we'd be at the villa within 15 to 20 minutes, and then I drove up a steep path that leveled off at the top. Because of the slope, I couldn't see what was at the top, so I made sure to crest the hill nice and slowly to avoid any kind of collision. But then, as I did, someone jumped out of the bushes at the side of the road and was lit up by my headlights. I could see that he had a long, double-barreled shotgun in his hands, and he was aiming it right at me. I slammed on the brakes as my wife started to panic. Then I was struggling to get the car in reverse when, all of a sudden, I heard, "No, no," from outside the car. A second man had jumped out of the bushes and was lowering the first man's shotgun while telling him no. They both shot us a look of horror, realizing we were not who they thought we were. Then the second man, who stopped the first from shooting, walked over to the driver's side window and tapped on the glass. When I rolled it down, he gave me and my wife this big, nervous smile as he said, "Mi dispiace molto, signore," which I knew from my Italian phrase book meant, "I'm very sorry, sir." I didn't really speak much Italian, and what little I'd learned went right out the window when that guy pointed his shotgun at me, so all I could manage in reply was, parle inglés? Or do you speak English? And the man said, no, no, in that melodic, drawn-out Italian way, and then said, no English, mi dispiace. I then heard my wife ask, are you police? Policia? And the man replied, si, policia, with the same big smile on his face, and then told us, avanti, vai, which just means, come on then, move along. And we both thanked him, and by that point, Tom had woken up in the back seat and was getting very agitated, asking, Mommy, Daddy, who are these men? And we told him it was the police, but they had been very friendly and were letting us go. I think my wife believed them at the time, so she was very convincing and reassuring Tom that there was nothing to worry about. But me, I didn't believe a word he'd said about being the police. I didn't say anything with Tom in earshot, and I didn't want to scare him, and arriving at the villa really took the edge off too, because it was even nicer in the flesh than it was in the brochure. But then, once we gotten Tom all tucked into bed and had a few moments to settle down, I told my wife what I'd been thinking. I told her how I didn't think those men were the police. They weren't in uniform. That shotgun looked like it had come off a farm, not from a police arsenal, and they didn't even attempt to show us any badges or identification or anything like that. And she asked me, well, if they weren't police, who were they? And I replied, the mafia. My wife just sat down in bed in silence as I made my case, and when I was done, it made sense to her too. A couple of mafiosos had been waiting to ambush someone, and they thought that person was us. The only thing that stopped us freaking out completely was that we were at least a couple of miles away from that ambush site, so the chances of running into them again seemed minimal. She suggested we call the police in the hopes they had an English speaker down at the station, but even if they did, I wasn't sure that was a good idea. The idea of rocking the boat like that made me feel even more nervous than having that shotgun pointed at me and my family, because while that whole thing had apparently been a mistake, having us snitching on the local mafia on our first day in Italy was a deliberate act that might well bring us some undue attention. I'm not saying it was an easy decision to make. I was furious that some idiot had pointed a gun at us, but it quickly became a question of, if we're going to be staying there for 2 weeks, what was the course of action that was going to keep us safest? And that's how we decided to honor that age-old mafia tradition of keeping our bloody mouths shut. The next day, we decided to walk down to Lusalena to do some exploring, and that's how we found this little bar that served paninis, espresso, and assortment of little pastries. I got a coffee, and then while my wife and son got Cokes and played around with the table football set in the little games room they had, I sat at the bar and discovered the bartender actually spoke English. We talked back and forth, and he gave me some restaurant recommendations. Then suddenly, a group of older men who were drinking coffee and playing cards started gesturing toward the bar's television. The bartender turned up the TV, which was showing us a news report of some kind. I asked the bartender what it was about, and after listening to the news lady speak for a minute or so, he turned back to me and said, "There's been a murder, not far from here. This was a businessman who got killed. Terrible thing." I asked him exactly how far away the murder had been, and after consulting with some of the older men, the bartender confirmed my suspicions. It had taken place in almost the exact spot where those armed men had jumped out of the bushes ready to fire at us. I didn't rush to tell the wife. I didn't want to frighten her any more than she already was. But later that day, once we were back at the villa and getting ready to head out for dinner, I told her about the murder. Again, it wasn't like anything we could do about it, or rather, it was nothing we were willing to stick our necks out over by getting involved with local crime. The best thing we could do was try to forget about it, head to Lusalena and enjoy some incredible home-cooked food. It was so good that our young son Tom suddenly didn't mind trying new things when they were all so delicious. And so we ate our fill, and when we were all finished, we asked for the bill. The waiter then comes out with the restaurant's owner, and the pair of them explain in very broken English that the meal had already been paid for. Then when I asked who the generous person was, they explained that it was someone we'd had a misunderstanding with. At first, my wife and I didn't make the connection, and we tried explaining there hadn't been any kind of misunderstanding. We loved the food, and we wanted nothing more than to support their business by paying our bill. But the owner insisted. Our money was no good there. Then when we ate there again the second night, with every intention of leaving a large tip, they once again explained our food was free. But by then, we'd figured out who was paying for our meals. It was the mafia. It didn't happen anywhere else, and we made sure to visit plenty of other places because we felt terrible. I mean, as far as we knew, the mafia hadn't really paid for our food, and those poor people were being forced to cook for free. But then, every time we did eat there, they seemed really happy to see us, and the waiter would always bring our gelato for our 4-year-old son without us asking for it. My wife didn't always approve of all that ice cream, but you better believe Tom did. That made us think that maybe those mafia guys really were paying the owners for all our food, and that they were running a little scam of their own and giving us as much as possible so they could claim it all back from the mafia. But since we didn't see them ever again, I suppose we'll never know. They never reached out to us, and we didn't see those 2 armed guys around the village at all. But I suppose it was probably a case of they saw us, we just didn't see them. It was an amazing but very intense holiday. But the next time we visited Italy, we went to a completely different part of the country and had no repeat encounters with any nocturnal assassins. We had to pay for all our meals, which my wallet definitely wasn't thanking me for, but we still found that second holiday much more relaxing than the first.